If I look back, my 20-year-old self, the things I got emotional about were just wasted energy. And I think about some of those different things that I wasted energy on are like, will you get this assignment versus that assignment? It doesn't matter. Somebody else is picking. By narrowing your focus on what your priorities are and what you focus your emotional energy on, you can actually make those things count and be more open like I am now. What do you care about? You care about just being a good human being. And that looks like so many different things.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Path Found, the podcast about the real, messy, unexpected journeys that lead us to the work we love. I'm Monica Argandonia, and every week I talk with someone whose story proves there's no single right way to build a meaningful life. What if every detour in your life turned out to be exactly the right path? Justin Rufa grew up in Messina, a small Rust Belt town on the St. Lawrence River in northern New York, with one clear thought: I'm leaving. What he didn't know was just how many times he'd have to leave and return and leave again before he understood what he was actually looking for. He went to the Air Force Academy and almost didn't graduate. He got his master's, his PhD, and his dream assignment, and still ended up teaching high school calculus in Colorado Springs. He moved to Kansas for a job that lasted 2 months. And through all of it, what kept showing up? A passion for building relationships, mentoring students, and figuring out what it means to be a good human being. Today, Justin is a math tutor, academic coach, and aspiring Montessori middle school teacher in the Boulder area. His story is one of the most genuinely nonlinear ones I've had the privilege of hearing, and I think you'll recognize a piece of yourself in it. Justin, I'm so happy to have you here this morning with me. And as I start everything, can you just give us a little bit of background on, what were you like growing up? Where are you from?
So I actually grew up in a small Rust Belt town in northern New York named Messina on the Canadian border. Our claim to fame is we were halfway between the North Pole and the equator, or at least I thought we were, until I actually learned about how the globe works. We're actually a little closer to the equator to the North Pole, 45th latitude north, on the St. Lawrence River, which kind of speaks to how our town grew up. We have a power dam there that bridges the U.S. and Canada. We spent a lot of time going between the U.S. and Canada. And also what I found was interesting was because we had that cheap electricity, we had 2 aluminum plants, and we had a General Motors plant, only one of which is in existence today. So my family was one of those blue-collar families. We played sports, we worked hard in school, our parents worked overtime sometimes, and, we just always tried hard to be a good Italian Catholic family up in northern New York, and occasionally driving south on I-81 or I-95, and I did that for first 18 years of my life.
Did you know, did you think I'm going to end up in one of these factories? This was my path, or what were you thinking?
I did not have that thought once in my life. My thought was, I'm leaving for college. I didn't know what that looked like, but from the beginning, I knew that I was leaving Messina, New York, because I needed to see what else was out there.
What do you think drove that?
I think that I was one of those kids that always would read with a flashlight under my blankets. I read the whole Hardy Boy series in, I don't know, maybe 3 weeks. And so I think that is just always I just really like to read. I like to do math. I was very STEM heavy from a young age. And I think it just kind of, as I learned more, especially about NASA, and I was a kid who had the mini space shuttle and everything. I wasn't sure I was going to be an astronaut, but that intrigued me, and I knew I couldn't do that where I was living. I knew that I had to go away somewhere to learn whatever those skills were that those people had to do that kind of stuff.
So where did you end up?
So I actually ended up going to the Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs because my parents like the fact that service academies don't have tuition, even though I wanted to go to the University of Michigan. Applied, got in, found what out-of-state tuition cost, and they're like, you need to focus more on the school out in Colorado Springs.
Yeah, finances play a role. All right, so you end up at the Air Force Academy, and so what was that like?
Oh, it was really hard. And I actually, the first year I applied, I actually got into the Air Force Academy Prep School, which is an on-campus 1-year preparation program. It's very academic focused with some military parts of it. It's more geared for folks that are already in the Air Force, want to transition to becoming officers and go to the Air Force Academy, rather than folks who are just run-of-the-mill high school students. So for me, that year was fairly straightforward. But then actually going to the academy for the 4-year program, the basic training, you hear all these stories about police summer at some the other service academies, and their first academy was just like that. For the first 6-8 weeks you're there, you're always with people. And it was just, either you're in a dorm room with the roommates, you're doing physical activities, you're doing military stuff, you're eating, but it's always with people. And it's not until you finish basic training and right before you start classes, first time you're allowed on your own. And when you're flying allowed on your own, anytime you're out in the general area of the Air Force Academy, it's what we call the cadet area, is essentially a big square. You have to run on these 1 foot by 1 foot marble strips on what's called the Tross field. And as a freshman, you can only run around the perimeter. So anywhere you get, you have to go in right angles. So,
Did you ever think, I'm not going to keep doing this?
because I went to the prep school, I didn't really think about the other options, like all those other colleges I applied to. And even when I got to the academy, finished basic training, and I was running on these 1x1 marble strips, I didn't think about that. I knew what I was getting into, right? Because being at the prep school, we got to spend 2 days up watching these freshmen and observing them. And like, that's terrifying, but clearly that's part of the path. So we'll do it. And I think that it really wasn't until like I had some struggles athletically while I was there. Like, yeah, I'll pass physical fitness test. Had some struggles with some of that. And when it got to the end and they were going to not let me graduate because of that, that's when I started exploring other options. And one unique part of my story is that one of the schools I applied to way back when, before I went to college, that was only 10 miles from Messina, New York, a school called Clarkson University. That came back. That came back 5 years later because they said, well, you really need to like pass these PE classes and this physical fitness test to graduate. I had a collapsed lung at one point and things weren't, there's a lot of different drama happening. And to make a long story short, I ended up having to spend a semester at that school in New York after I finished at the academy while everything was getting sorted out.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So you didn't graduate from the Air Force Academy?
I did.
Okay.
That was what was interesting. So it took about 6 to 8 months to get all sorted out. But then finally said, we're going to honor your graduation and your commission. And so when my graduation actually was with the ROTC students at Clarkson University and their spring graduation in 2003, my congressman actually awarded me my Air Force Academy plaque, the same one I got a nomination from to attend in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
It was two full circle moments at once.
That's awesome. All right. So
Yeah.
What were you, so you're at the Air Force Academy. What were you actually studying? What was your major?
I studied aeronautical engineering. I knew from day one. And what's interestingly, as I've talked to more students who want to attend the service academies and Air Force Academy in particular, many of them say, I'm going to go study aeronautical engineering. And we always chuckle, like, because that's what I'm going to go fly and I'm going to be an aeronautical engineer. That's back in the late 90s, early 2000s. That's why people started they would go there. Well, there's only 40 aeronautical engineering majors in my class out of 1,000. So clearly there were a lot of people that changed their plans.
Right. All right. So you graduate with that degree. Then what?
Then I finally get my commission a year later and I end up in the Air Force. I end up in sunny, warm, windy, hot, humid Oklahoma City, Oklahoma at Tinker Air Force Base in the middle of everywhere. I will say this today, like I said it when we got there 23 years ago, people in Oklahoma are some of the nicest people on earth. It's a great place to be young. My wife and I had just gotten married. We were young. We didn't have kids. We only had 2 cats. I was very young in my career, so not a lot of expectations. So we just got to I got to just have all that fun that I guess that you don't necessarily have going to a service academy like other college students maybe would. But I did that from being like 23 to 25 instead of 18 to 22.
Okay. So what are you doing and how long are you there?
I was there for about 2.5-ish years, almost 3 years. My first job actually was a good eye-opener. We worked in a building that's Building 3001 is the name. Anybody who listens to this has ever been to Tinker Air Force Base knows I'm going to talk about it. I think the building's like 3/4 a mile to a mile long because they essentially refurbish airplanes in there. My first job was I had to walk around to all the different organizations in there that are part of all these processes and learn about their paperwork. I'm an engineer, and the first thing I get to learn about is engineering paperwork.
Okay. That had to be a surprise.
It was a little bit of a surprise, but it was good because I got to meet so many people. I got to meet so many people in that building during those first couple of years. And I just got to tag along to meetings and just like talk to people, take notes. And it was, as I reflect back on it, it was the perfect first assignment, even though it wasn't as glamorous as what a lot of my friends did.
Okay. Then what else do you do?
I actually went back to school. But of course, it was another nonlinear type situation because I applied initially to go to grad school, and the Air Force said, "Well, you're good, but we'll put you on the supplemental list in case more spots open up." And then, of course, a month later, like more spots opened up, so we're going to have you go to grad school, or you have to go to our grad school, which is in Dayton, Ohio, at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. So we pack, my wife and I and our 2 cats pack up. We drive northeast to southwestern Ohio, and I become a student again.
Okay. You did paperwork first. Did you ever work actually as an aeronautical engineer?
A little bit. During my last year or so there, I got to work on the big refueling aircraft, KC-135s, which sadly was in the news recently. These one had crashed in western Iraq. But we worked on a couple of different projects on those. because they were such old aircraft. We worked on, I guess the best way to describe it is they're little upgrades that just either made the plane operate more functionally sound, or it made like things less loud, or just kind of like, or one of the projects had to do with creature comforts. One of the projects was replacing the wheels and brakes. And so I got to just kind of dabble in that for about a year and just, again, be a sponge and just kind of absorb everything.
So why did you decide to go back to school, and what do you do?
An engineer, I was in a situation where I knew my career would take one of two paths. And one of them was I was going to go back to the Air Force Academy and teach. Thought I was going to go do a flight test, become a flight test engineer, and go to test pilot school to do that, which is at Edwards Air Force Base, not too far from where you are. And so both of them required a master's degree. And so I knew I got to get the master's degree, and the test pilot school also required me getting more involved in like civil aviation and getting private pilot's license and those kind of things. So kind of how I made the decision was I'm not as interested in that piece of it as I am in the school piece of it. So that's why I went to get a master's degree, and then I had to think about making that decision.
Okay. So again, more engineering. This is a master's, not a PhD.
Yes.
You get through that program. Then what?
So then I stayed there, got into more program management, but still kind of aircraft engineering. It was more experimental, where we take some different parts like a radar and an infrared camera. Can we put them together? And will that let us see through weather? We actually worked with a couple of organizations in Southern California doing that. So I got to again go back out to Edwards. Again, who went to Edwards did that. Got to do some other cool stuff where we do. This was interesting. It's not just analyzing satellite imagery, using satellite imagery and looking where can you land an airplane if you had to, like a big airplane if you had to, which is interesting given, again, what's happened recently in the Middle East with rescuing the downed pilot, where we landed some airplanes. So I found that was another full circle moment. But when we were working this way back when, we were driving around the cornfields of southwestern Illinois, right just east of St. Louis. We actually ran this software analysis on this particular area. And one day, 100-degree heat and humidity in the middle of the summer, we drove around and checked these places out to see, did the software do a good job? And so that was one of my very fondest memories of being in the Air Force, is that day driving around and stopping for lunch and just getting to know all these people while we were just sweating profusely.
Okay, so you're enjoying the work. You finished grad school. It's going well. So then what?
So then I finally go back to teach at the Air Force Academy.
Okay.
Yeah, that was because I had that kind of decision point. I did this previous job we just discussed. That was kind of my payback for the master's. That organization they sponsored my spot to get the master's. I paid them back for a few years. And then I applied to come back out to Colorado to teach to Colorado Springs. And again, because life is nonlinear, I come out and I interview with the aeronautical engineering department. And like, what's where I'm going to teach? That's where I got my degree from, and everything made sense, right? But then there was something back in my head that said, well, if you're out there, why don't you talk to a couple other departments? So I also talked to the math department. And they're like, yeah, sure. We're the biggest departments. We generally always have spots open. Come out and talk to us. We'll do an interview, and you can do a practice lesson and things like that. So I go out there and I do that. And then a few months later, the aeronautical engineering department says, yeah, we'd love to have you out here. We got a spot for you. We're excited to have you come out next year and teach. Like, great, perfect. And go back, teach in the same department where I got my degree from. Then, of course, life happened, and 3 months later, like, sorry, that spot's no longer open for whatever reasons. We're really sorry. Like, did you interview with any other departments who are out here? I did. Interview with the math department. Like, well, they said, we'll talk to them and you call them up and we'll see what we can do for you. And that's how I ended up teaching in the math department at the Air Force Academy. Just
going back a little bit, you were really enjoying your work. You got your master's, you're enjoying this new work you're doing. What made you decide to go teach?
It's something I knew I wanted to do. And it just like, I was enjoying the work, but one of the things I suffer from is once I get in kind of that routine for long enough, and the military does this to us too, right? We crave novelty, we crave change, and we crave change on a 36-month clock. And I had been at that base for 48 months. So I did a master's there, and then I did this job. Like, it's time to go. We've been in Dayton, Ohio for 48 months. We're getting too comfortable here.
Okay. All right. So teaching, is it what you expected? Are you enjoying it?
It was actually a really enjoyable experience. The department did a fantastic job at the beginning. Like, we show up in the beginning of the summer. We showed up in June. Class don't even start there till August. And we essentially spent a month like relearning calculus. That's the first class everybody teaches. And we spent a whole month relearning it. And then we spent another month like learning about what it means to be a faculty member at the Air Force Academy. So that's 8 weeks of preparation before we even show up in the classroom. And when you're earlier in your career, you end up getting involved in more different activities as you either volunteer or you get volunteered. So I got volunteered for a lot of different things, opportunities when I was there for those 2 years. The second year I was there, I was actually in charge of running all the administration for the department. It was about 75% military, 25% civilian professors. And so the military have like performance reports, they have like different training requirements, all that kind of stuff. I kept track of all of that and kind of kept the trains on the track for that kind of stuff. I also got volunteered to be the summer research representative, which essentially meant that I had to go out and seek different summer research opportunities for the cadets that would go like for 3 weeks at a time to a different Air Force location and do like Air Force centric math type research, or operations research, and like on an Air Force problem type thing. So I got to organize all of that, from finding the opportunities, all the travel, all the funding. I was on the academic eligibility committee for the Division I hockey team.
Oh, wow.
All while doing my day job of actually teaching cadets calculus.
All right. So did you like being in the classroom?
I loved it. I wasn't good at it initially, but I loved it. I was that teacher or that professor who's going to die on every hill like my first couple semesters. Right. And then the second year, I started picking less hills to die on. Then I got sent back off to school again because I knew that I really liked this. I didn't want to be able to do this longer term. But the buy-in to do that is going back to grad school to get a PhD.
Right. So, all right. So you go and get a PhD then?
Yes.
In Colorado?
It was an interesting time because there were budget constraints. So I was told that I could go to civilian school if the civilian school fully funded me. I applied to 4 schools. I knew those would be possible. I applied to Michigan. I looked into Michigan, Colorado, University of Minnesota, University of Texas were the 4 schools I looked into. And another full circle moment, I picked Michigan.
That's awesome. So you finally get to go to Michigan.
I finally get to go to Michigan. And what's crazy is they still have my student ID number from when I applied and was accepted back in 1996, 97. So it's the same number. I was still in the system.
So your PhD, it was in what?
It was in aerospace engineering.
So now you completed your PhD in engineering. You're done now.
Yes, I'm done with school at that point.
And then you went back to teaching.
I did not go back to teaching because the Air Force doesn't think it's good development to teach, go get a terminal degree and then go teach again. I think maybe you should spend a little time back in the Air Force before you come back to teach again. So I went down to Southern California for 3 years.
Okay. Where'd you end up?
I was at what was known then as LA Air Force Base in El Segundo.
All right. Teaching. Or no, working on the base.
I was working there. I was working in space launch, which was, again, that goes back to my NASA dream when I was a kid. But when I actually got the behind the scenes of space launch, and it is not as glamorous as we saw with the Artemis 2 launch. That's not what it is behind the scenes.
That's pretty cool. I mean, you kind of, you may not have landed where you wanted to immediately, but end up getting there eventually. So you're at space launch. You said it wasn't as glamorous, but did you like it? Did you enjoying yourself?
The work was interesting, but it was a culture that was completely foreign to me, which was a struggle because I was still like very amped up for my PhD program. Like it took me a long time to spool back down. And, I was I'm going back to the Air Force. I want to get back at it. Then I show up at this new assignment. I don't know anybody. I don't know anything about this world except for I'm an engineer. And so it went back to kind of that first assignment back in Oklahoma where I was just talking to people, writing things down. And I kept doing that. But I was more than halfway through my career at that point. And I felt like I'm brand new again and I don't have any responsibility to somebody who's like halfway through their career. I had responsibility to somebody who's like brand new. So that was a tension that I struggled with during my time there because I was learning a culture while also learning a new way of doing engineering, or different way of doing engineering all at the same time.
And you were there 3 years.
I was there about 3 years.
So then what?
So then I finally get to go back to Colorado Springs, finally get to go teach at the Air Force Academy the second time and use that shiny PhD. And it was such a different time. Like at that point, my wife and I we had a child at that point who was 5 or 6, I think. 3. No, he was only 3. And we're back when he was 3. And so we're back in Colorado. I'm older, more experienced. Teaching looks so much different. I have all these higher level responsibilities in the department now because I am more senior in my career. And I recognize that the teaching was fleeting and to really appreciate it more and really appreciate the time with the cadets. During that time, my lessons were just so much more full of, we talked more real world, we talked more real life, we made more connections, like both with math, both with other subjects, talked about the Air Force. It was so much more than just standing up at the board and writing and dry erasing.
That's awesome. I do believe that's what students remember more than a lot of the other stuff. So how long do you do that? Are you still doing that?
I'm not doing that anymore. So I did that from 2017 to beginning of 2019. Then at the beginning of 2019, I had to go because I hadn't deployed yet in my career. I had to go do something that was deployment light. I do have a medical issue that keeps me from going overseas. So I went to a base in the US to work on more Air Force operational centric type issues for 6 months, to have that experience to kind of see how this actually plays out and when we're actually doing like Air Force operations. So I did that. I did that for 6 months, first half of 2019, and then came back to teaching. So this is July 2019. So I go 6 months back there and I finally get the job I've been looking for. I was in charge of all the math courses that the STEM majors would take. You know, the physics majors, engineering majors, economics majors. I was in charge of all those math courses. So I got to work with course directors and other faculty members. And I really got to know my department much better there because I had to decide I had to go around and talk to different professors, ask them, are you interested in teaching any of my courses next semester? And if so, how many courses, how many sections, things like that. What are you looking to bring to it? And then ask them how I can continue to make the courses more effective. And so I really got to do the thing that everything had been preparing me for in that role. All my education, all my experiences, all my mentoring, all the leadership, that was kind of the culmination, that role. And remembered, that was July 2019. And then fast forward to March of 2020.
Right.
Yep. Now do it all remote.
So did you stick through that?
We did it remotely, and I just had to. It was a good opportunity to let go. I'm telling my instructors, course directors, I'm not going to tell you how to do your job for the most part from this point forward, because I don't know how to teach online any more than you do. I will help you in whatever way I can. I will support you, but I won't ever tell you what to do in that situation, other than as long as we're treating the cadets right and everybody is safe. Right. So, and I ended up doing that from March that year until we went back in person for a little bit that fall of 2020. But then we ended up going remotely from the beginning of November onward to make sure that the cadets could travel home for Christmas because they were not able to travel home for Thanksgiving. And so that was my last semester in the classroom at that point teaching. So I was going to retire I retired in July of 21. So that fall of 2020 was my last semester teaching. And then in the spring, it was all retirement type stuff and burning all my vacation days and things like that.
So you retired at what age?
I retired from the Air Force. It was July 1st, 2021 at 42 years and almost a month old.
So you'd been there over 20 years.
I was in the Air Force about 23 weeks short of 24 years.
Yeah.
If you count the Air Force Academy time. Yeah.
All right. So you retire in 2021. Now what? What happens?
This is when the story actually gets good.
Okay.
There's a little bit of a joke in the Air Force and the pilot community that after pilots retire, they're going to keep being a pilot for the airline, or they're going to become a high school math teacher. Well, I wasn't a pilot, but I was teaching math. And one of the unknowns about retired ones, I had no idea how the money was. So I know I need to find a job. And there's a local Catholic high school in Colorado Springs. I was looking for math teaching for the 21-22 school year. Well, I haven't found anything yet. I'm not sure what to do. So I'll go teach math for another year. I taught math at a Catholic high school for a year in Colorado Springs.
Okay. Very different than college.
It was. It was interesting because I had some students there that were applying to service academy, so I was able to support them with that. I was very proud of the seniors. I went to their graduation, and I told them I taught AP calculus. I told anybody that gets a 5, I'll take you out. Anybody that gets 5 in the AP exam, I'll take you out to dinner. But then there was a job I had kind of been looking at the previous year that popped back up. It was a research manager, a UAS unmanned aircraft research manager job at Kansas State. And at that point, we had been in Colorado Springs for 5 years. And again, a moving itch.
Mm-hmm.
My wife's starting a new career as a speech therapist. So she's at this point, she does not, it doesn't matter where she does it because speech therapists were banned everywhere. We decided to drive the 500 miles to Kansas and give that a shot. And I lasted 2 months in that job.
Did you take any of your students to dinner?
We'll get there.
Okay. All right, go ahead.
One of my students was actually on a road trip, and so the campus I was supporting for Kansas State was one of Salina, which is just in the middle of Kansas on I-70, and it's about 60,000 people. But we ended up living in Wichita, it was about 80 miles south. It was about 400,000 or 500,000 people. So I'd be driving up 3 or 4 days a week, and that's part of why the job only lasted 2 months, because I just couldn't keep doing. I just don't want to keep doing that drive. But one of my students from the Catholic school was on a road trip that summer and came to Wichita. I told him, like, a deal's a deal. You find a restaurant and I'll be there with my credit card.
Did they?
Yeah. Yeah. So I actually ended up taking them to breakfast. So
Nice.
but it was at a good greasy diner in Wichita though.
All right. So now what happens in Kansas?
We're there for a year. It actually was a good opportunity for me to realize that I got to figure out actually what I actually want to do with my life versus rather just keep taking jobs.
Which is an interesting question in your 40s.
Very interesting. Because at this point, this is 2022. So now I'm 43, which I thought was old.
Okay.
So I start having conversations with people and start trying to like, could I find something to work here? There's this nagging feeling in the back of my mind, in the back of my wife's mind. Because about a month after we moved there, my wife drove back out to Colorado Springs to take our son to a scuba camp we had promised him. And when she was there was when I actually quit my job. And she thought, well, I'll just stay in Colorado. Why do I have to go back there? Like, well, you got your first speech therapy job out here, and right, it's like where our family is. And we had a really elderly dog, that was kind of thing. But with the feeling in the back of our head was maybe we belong in Colorado. And that's what that year in Kansas showed us, was that while I was trying to figure my life out, I was figuring it out from afar.
So you go back to Colorado.
Yes. And we ended up renting on the side of a hill just northwest of Boulder. And so my wife got a job in the Boulder school district, and they came out 3 months later. And we knew we were back where we needed to be, which was, I think, priority number one. Our son was in a good school situation, priority number two. This whole time I was doing tutoring, and it was keeping me a little bit engaged. But then I found this thing, I don't know what to call it, called academic coaching that I didn't even know was a thing. So I'd run into, I'd seen an online job posting. I'm like, oh, that sounds interesting. Sounds like trying for me to like help students like get to know themselves better and then apply those skills to their schoolwork. And so I started doing that online while I was trying to find, I explored different opportunities in Boulder. I mean, I applied to do the academic coaching in person. I even applied to work they have a junior ranger program out here that exposes like 12 to 14-year-olds to doing like park ranger type work. I applied to be like a coordinator for that. I did all sorts of things. I did a 9-month immersion with one of the conservation organizations out here. It was a monthly meetup to learn about land conservation and water conservation. And it was just a whole smorgasbord of things that I tried during those first couple of years back out here.
Did you settle on something? Are you still trying to figure it out?
I actually, last year, I got a 1-year contract with the Project Management Institute, kind of going back to that very engineer project management type part of my brain. And we worked with Lincoln Lab out in the Boston area for a year. It was good to kind of get back into that. That was like dipping my toe back in the government military world, but doing it as a contractor, not even the contracting to an organization supporting another organization. So I was very separated as far as all the bureaucracy. It was good to travel a little bit. It was good to like talk to other people with advanced degrees again and get back into that. But it was a year. And what it showed me was my passion is teaching. My passion is definitely teaching. It's the tutoring, it's the academic coaching, it's the mentoring.
So are you teaching now?
I am right now in the process of potentially like working as a part-time Montessori math lead next year.
Oh, okay.
For middle school. Or some will be going into 7th grade next year. Not at that school, but the same age group. And what's interesting is my wife's at a middle school right now, speech therapist, and she's going to high school next year. But what I've learned is that the younger that you can have that influence on them, the more that influence is going to help them grow and expand. Like, even college students, I love my cadet, but if they got their mindset on doing something a certain way, you're not going to change their mind at 22 years old. You got to wait till they're like at least 45 again.
Until they're 45. So a couple of things. Looking back, I have students who have considered military. Would you advise that for someone in high school may not either know what they want to do or as an avenue to kind of move up quickly?
What I would say is that I don't advise for it or against it. What I tell people is, what are you seeking? Are you seeking structure? Are you seeking kind of that discipline, that ability to put your goals below the goals of a bigger type entity while still working on your goals, but knowing that in return for making your goals subservient, you're going to get a lot of benefits that just don't exist anywhere else in our society right now, right? You're going to get an entity to pay you to wander around the world for X number of years and potentially pay for degrees and moves and whatever else. And then if you stick it out for 20 years, they'll pay your health insurance for the rest of your days and a retirement.
Right.
So what I would tell people is you can almost anything for 2 years, 4 years, like at that age, at 18 to 22, 18 to 30 years old. If this looks like something that you'll get more out of it than you'll put into it. And you'll put a lot into it. So it's hard to get more out of it than you put into it. I absolutely did. But if you think that's a possibility, then it's certainly something to consider.
Okay. So you're teaching now. This is going to be it for a little while, at least, until maybe, I mean, it seems like you're very open to all kinds of opportunities. So maybe something else happens, 10 years from now. But looking back now at, your path and what you did, what advice would you give your 20-year-old self, knowing what you know now?
Yes. If I look back, my 20-year-old self, I remember the day I turned 20, actually. I was in the summer between my freshman and sophomore year at the Air Force Academy. I remember the dates. I remember right, and I thought, wow. I was walking across that same area where I didn't have to walk on the marble streets anymore. Like, wow, I'm 20 now. And what I know now that I didn't know then is that the things that matter really matter, yet 99.9 of the things don't matter.
Okay. You want to explain that a little bit more?
Yeah. It's about priorities, right? For example, what used to matter to me, right? I remember this vividly. The day before my mom passed unexpectedly, I was watching University of Michigan hockey was playing in a national championship game against University of Minnesota Duluth. And they lost in overtime. Michigan lost in overtime. I remember screaming out top of my TV for like 20 minutes. I was so mad. And so fast forward to like a couple months ago, they were playing University of Denver in the semis. And they lost in double overtime. I'm like, oh, whatever. I got stuff to go do. And still white out here. I got work to do. And it just like, as I think about my younger self, the things I got emotional about were just wasted energy. Right? And I think about some of those different things that I wasted energy on are like, will you get this assignment versus that assignment? It doesn't matter. Somebody else is picking. You said your piece, somebody else is going to pick, and you're going to go make the most of it, right? I think by kind of narrowing your focus on what your priorities are and what you focus your emotional energy on, you can actually make those things count and be more open like I am now to whatever comes, because now you're just in this receive mode. Because what do you care about? You care about just being a good human being. And that looks like so many different things.
Right. I think that's great advice. I usually say, ask yourself, is this going to be significant in 10 years from now?
Right.
And like you said, most things aren't.
Right.
Yeah. So that's nice. I like that. Any advice for college students kind of on their path?
There's so much noise right now that they're having to filter out from like what's actually meaningful right now about like, do I study what I care about? Do I study something that's going to like help me get a job in AI? Do I do STEM? Do I like all these kind of things? They're hearing so many different things. And what's helped me get to a lot of dark times since 2021 is that I go back to what are the first principles of humanity? What does it mean to be a human? Because the first principle of humanities persist, and they always will as long as there's humans on Earth. And my advice, because I don't give advice, but what I did was I started reading history from about 1800 onward, and specifically U.S. history, which the history is not unique to the U.S., but I think it's important to read the history about the lands that we're currently sitting on and how things have evolved or devolved, and like the Faustian bargain made when the Constitution was signed. I think that I got a lot out of that over the last few years of just recognizing that we're no different than the people 200 years ago. We're making different deals with the devil at this point. And how can you as a college student make a deal that you can live with and knowing that while also trying to be a good human being? Because that's what it's about. Yes, you do have to pay your bills, but you also have to sleep too. Can you pay your bills and sleep at night? What does that look like to you? And focus on that.
Nice. Justin, thank you. Thank you for sharing your story. You've had quite an interesting path. I'm sure you are great in the classroom because when you find that passion, you care so much about students that really shows. So thank you. And yeah, this was great.
I appreciate the time, Monica. I appreciate the opportunity. And I most definitely appreciate what you're doing. I really do.
Thanks. I appreciate that. And hopefully this will hit somebody in the right place and it'll connect with them. So thank you, Justin.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to Path Found. If anything we talked about today connected with you or gave you a new perspective, we'd love it if you subscribed, left a review, or shared the episode with someone you care about. You can also find us on Instagram at Path Found Podcast. To explore more stories, resources, and ways to get involved, visit KeystoneNetwork.org. This podcast is just one part of the journey. At Keystone Network, we're helping young people and anyone figuring it out as they go build meaningful futures one step at a time. A huge thank you to my podcast editor, David Strutt. You can find him on LinkedIn for helping bring these stories to life, and to Elizabeth Miner at Silvermine Creative for the beautiful artwork and web design. And if you're on your own path, navigating the unknown, making a pivot, or simply figuring it out as you go, just know you're not alone. The route may not be linear, but there's always a way forward. I'm Monica Argandonia, and I'll see you next time on Path Found.